Okay, we're continuing in Halacha Gimel about Mevushal. We spoke twice already about it, and this is our last time, at least for now, talking about being Mevushal. And the first time we spoke about just a basis for where it comes from, that why should Mevushal make the wine not usher. And the second time we spoke about what temperature you need to make it to be Mevushal. And our third time now is to talk about whether whatever we decided the temperature should be, we spoke about different shitas, whether doing that by pasteurization is good enough to make a mevushal. So, until, I don't know, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, the way you mevashal wine was you cooked it up in a pot. You mevashal it, okay? Then came along pasteurization, which is really efficient and really works really smoothly. And the question was whether pasteurization should be able to work for bishul.
Do you know why they would have been mevashal wine back
why they mevashal it?
So what was there?
To make the mutter.
Okay.
Why would anybody else do it?
The only Orthodox Jews.
I don't know. That I can't tell you. There's a din at the very end of the simon about a different kind of called a kind of a bishul, but that's not a regular use. I have no idea. Okay, so just for a second, for whatever it's worth, what does it mean to do pasteurization? Okay, so the picture here. Sorry if I'm going to bore you, Yossi. The picture here is a pasteurizer, what we call pasteurizer. The way usually you pasteurize juice or wine would be, and this is a plate pasteurizer. Okay, but what really goes on in this thing is the following. Okay, that those plates that you see in the pasteurizer, in the full pasteurizer, are really a bunch of plates that are stuck right together. And this is an exploded view of them. And they're really all stuck together, they're very close one to another, with a little bit of rubber just to keep them from actually touching. But they're basically they're almost touching each other. And what you do is in our case the juice passes between every other plate, and in the opposite plates where it's not passing is passing hot water. Okay, so what goes on in this case, you pick, let's suppose, say white is the juice and black is the hot water. So what's going on is that the juice and the juice is sandwiched between hot water on both sides. They're plates, and let's say that the on one side of a plate is hot water, and the other side is juice.
Black is the wine. It's pink and blue.
The pink is as in hot, like red, and the blue is supposed to be like the juice. The arrows are going up and down in all kinds of ways. And the juice is getting heated up very quickly, okay? It's very efficient and works really quickly, so the juice can pass through it in a couple of seconds, gets up to the temperature it needs for pasteurization. Pasteurization is really there, not for us, pasteurization is there to keep it from spoiling, kills bacteria and who knows what else. This is a very common piece of equipment that plants would use to heat something up. So it comes along, so the question that people have dealt with in the past, 30, 40 years is, can that do the trick to be mevashal wine also? Okay, it's a lot easier than putting it into a pot. Okay, so the question is, can you do that? If it would work, it has great advantages, because whatever temperature we picked, there's a thermometer that measures the temperature on this thing. The machine could see the temperature. You can even make it, the pasteurizer could be set up that if it doesn't hit the temperature, the juice goes right back to the beginning, gets pasteurized a second time to make sure it gets done. So it would really be nice if it could work. The machine would just basically stand there and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to. And the question is whether it works or not. So I'm going to tell you not all the details, but a summary of 4 reasons why people say pasteurization should not work. Why should that not be enough to make it mevushal, to make the wine mevushal? I'll tell you the sides of those shilas. Before I say that, it's people like to quote that Moshe held that you're allowed to pasteurization to work mevushal, and maybe he did. I don't see it in the printed truth. I don't see that in the printed truth. The printed truth that's most about being mevashal wine says there are people who ask me that they have someone not Jewish working in their house, and they want to make sure that their wine doesn't become stam yain. So they want to cook their wine to make it not mevushal. How hot should they make it if they want to make that wine be mevushal? So that's obviously not a pasteurizer. Someone's cooking it literally in a pot. They don't have a pasteurizer in the house. So I don't see it. Maybe it's in the truth that I didn't see it. Maybe it's orally that he said it. That Moshe said that. But the major American national hashgachas assume that you can be mevashal through a pasteurization.
Well, I want to get the other.
What did you say?
Just because it has a truth about cooking something.
No, I'm saying I don't see that he specifically said yes, you could do it even in a pasteurizer. I don't think he specifically said that. But people quote him as saying you can be mevashal.
Against it.
Right. He didn't say anything against it. We assumed that it was okay. And maybe he even said orally. Maybe someone actually knocked it into and said it. And maybe. I just don't know. And again, the National Hashgachas in America basically rely on that. Assuming you could do that. But I'm going to talk to you about these 4 reasons why you might not be able to. Okay. And the first like this. We saw that the some Rishonim explained that the way you know that wine is considered Mevushal is when it's Yechsim and Midasai. Okay? We saw this, the Shach brings that Shita. We talk about that in past, but whether that's a different Shita or not a different Shita. And the first point that's made as why a pasteurizer might not be Mevushal is because there's no Yechsim and Midasai. If you put in 100 gallons, you get out 100 gallons. And the reason is very simply, because the machine is a sealed up machine. Okay, there's basically whatever goes in comes right out. And how is you going to make it? Basically, whatever's going to happen is going to stay right inside the machine. You put in 100 gallons, you get out 100 gallons.
That just kind of condenses that into its own.
Correct. Yes, correct.
So really...
Look, I'm going to say that. Give me a second. I only just started 2 seconds ago. Okay, so before we talk about what David just said, so 2 people told us different shitas. 2 American hashgachas told us shitas that they have how they avoid this problem. They said, yes, taka would be a problem because it wouldn't be yachsim midasei. So one says it's not a problem because there's a release valve, a pressure release valve on the heat exchanger. If it gets too hot, they don't want the machine to explode. So there's a pressure release valve that there's too much pressure builds up inside of it, it releases some steam to let it out. So there's a pressure release valve. Okay, which we said, when he said this to us, he said, really, the pressure release valve? Okay, so, once every hour, there's a drop of steam, it gets a little too hot, it goes out. But the machines work really well. If it's supposed to be at 175 degrees, it stays at 175 degrees. It doesn't get out of its, what it's supposed to be, that it should need to release pressure. We weren't such believers of that.
And also, wasn't clear with the second one.
What the pressure release, really it is. The pressure release is at a much higher level. If it's set for 175, that means it's at 205, or whatever that it needs to release pressure. It can handle, so it was very, it didn't seem like it was going to do very much. It was going to be very useful to save pressure release valve. So then another person said this, okay, no, it's not that there is a pressure release valve. We tell the mashgiach that he should open up the valve. You can manually force it open, so he lets out some steam. So now it's yachsim maybe does it. Okay, so the question, 2 questions on that is...
Is that coming from the wine or from the water? Like, where's that steam coming from? Is that?
On the wine side of it, or the grape juice side of it, on that side of it. Let's add some of the...
That's an interesting question, because presumably the heat of the hot water in the plates are hotter than the product.
Correct.
So then the pressure release valve would probably be for the plates, and that's not much of a product.
I don't think so. I think it's on the juice side. I'm not sure. I think it's on the juice side. Okay, but if...
What boils first? The wine boils first, right? Is it?
The wine?
Water, the wine boils before the water?
Do you mean the alcohol?
Yeah, alcohol.
The alcohol evaporates.
Right, so you'd have more, the pressure would be coming from alcohol.
Okay, I think it's on the juice side. I think the water side is more stable of what it is. But okay, but it's not, two points. One is, let's say the mashgiach does this. Okay, so that means it's every hour, something beeps and he reminds you, oh yeah, time to release the valve. So it was yachsim midasai and what that little bit that he did. Yachsim midasai for the 100 gallons that went before he did it, it's not so clear that really works. It's yachsim midasai. But more significantly is, you may remember that we said last time that the Beverages Rishonim who say that Misha Hirsiach and Yachsim Midasai is the same thing. And others are saying, no, you think Yachsim Midasai is different than Misha Hirsiach. And we said, well, what's the difference? What do you mean? Either it is or it isn't. Either it's Yachsim or Rosh. Of course it's Yachsim Midasai. Passion. So what's the argument over here? And we said is, I believe we said it from a pastor, that the Machlokes is whether you need any minimal amount of loss. As soon as it gets to Yatz Letzba, there's already some evaporation. There's always Yachsim Midasai loses a tiny bit. That's what many Rishonim hold. And the Shach who's saying that they argue, which is like others say, is saying is you have to have significant loss. When we say you want to be machmir for this sheet to say you need also Yachsim Midasai, that means it's not loss, you have to have significant loss. And therefore the little bit that happens at Yatz Letzba is not enough to count. Okay, well, if you're trying to do Yachsim Midasai to have significant loss, then you have to do a lot. Opening the pressure valve for 1 second is not going to do the trick. The opening the valve is maybe it'll be enough for the smaller sheet. If you're trying to do the higher sheet of Yachsim Midasai, to do it at a higher temperature because you want to have significant loss, opening the valve for a second is not going to do the trick.
Is it objection that it's just artificial?
What's artificial?
You're opening the valve. So what if I'm cooking at not a high enough temperature, and I go and flip the thing, Yachsim Midasai. It's not.
Okay, so that's a fair question. But over here, the reason why they're saying that it works is because the whole reason that it doesn't work is because it's in a sealed machine. If that's the temperature, it would be Yachsim Midasai. So I'm just making it not a sealed machine. So I'm taking the cover off the pot.
What is the point of Yachsim Midasai? Why is that makes it Mevushal?
So
is that a simon or a semen?
So that's I was just about to say that, which is this whole question is making an assumption that Yachsim Midasai you actually have to be Yachsim Midasai, as opposed to just saying it's a simon that has to be a certain temperature. Okay, so now last time we spoke that Rav and Diane Weiss both seem to think that's a physical thing. It actually has to be a loss of thing. They don't explain why. We talked about a case for concentrated and when things done under vacuum that they think it's a physical thing. Okay, but you could argue and say, no, it's just a temperature. It has to hit that temperature, okay? Well, I'll remind you. The shear of Yachsim Midasai really comes from talking about Truma. Okay, in Truma, the reason why it's important is because you're not allowed to cook Truma because you're wasting the Truma. You're Yachsim Midasai, you're wasting it. The physical loss is exactly the point. You're not allowed to waste Truma. So by cooking it up to that point, you don't care what temperature it gets to, it's Yachsim Midasai. It's very significant. It's not so clear that over here it's so significant. Okay? But the strongest answer, the strongest reason to argue on this, say Pasteurization doesn't work because you didn't have any laws, is Rabbi Vanya, who you can hear lots from today, who says, and Rosh Zalman implies that he thinks like this also. Rabbi Vanya says, he says, I don't know what we're talking about. He says, it is Yachsim Midasai. When it's in the pasteurizer, vapors escape from the liquid, and then you just chill it down right afterwards, they condense and fall right back into it. He says, so the fact that you put in 100 gallons and you get out 100 gallons, that's what Dov was saying before, put in 100 gallons, get out 100 gallons, it was Yachsim Midasai. Just that we captured those vapors and we stuck them back in. So we kept it in a closed system so it didn't escape out to the air, but we just, whatever boiled out, we put right back in. So it was Yachsim Midasai.
How did they know there's vapors?
What do you say?
How did they know there's vapors?
Why shouldn't there be vapor?
Because the system's under pressure and the boiling point is raised.
So it's possible. It's true. You're right. It could be that he's wrong on the Metzias. It could be that if it's pressurized to whatever, as much pressurized as it is, it's not going to have any evaporation at that point. But that's a question. Okay, he's saying it is boiling out the same amount. Okay, you could question that. It's boiling out the same amount, and if it's boiling out the same amount, then just come right back in. Okay, you can argue. You can say it's pressurized, which I guess depends on the system. It could be pressurized and there'd be no vapor coming out.
Well, why is Bishul make it not? Why does it take off the answer? Is that because it's not shchiach, or because it does something bad to the wine?
Okay, so
because it gets lost. Now people don't want. It's not shchiach because I don't want to lose some of my wine.
Okay, so we've talked about that, and I'm going to keep on going about that. You're going to hear. I'm going to keep on talking about it. Okay, for now, I put this first. This is to look. It has to be Yachsim Midasai. Okay. Second reason is the Rosh Zalman, when he talks about it, first he wants to say, he doesn't use the word, but like what Ravagi just said, that it is Yachsim Midasai, but it comes right back in. He says, so don't worry about it. It was Yachsim Midasai, and it just collapse right back into it. But then he says, no. He says that in order for wine to be considered Mevushal, it has to be a kind of a wine. This is the one thing the Gemara does say, is that wine to be Mevushal has to be not used at Avodah Zarah. Nobody would pour it for Avodah Zarah. And he said, they do not pour it for Avodah Zarah. And he says, so if wine, that means, because there's something different about this wine than on non-Mevushal wine. And therefore he says is, Lamais is the wine coming out of the pasteurizer is going to taste exactly the same as what went into it. Now it's true that in the middle it didn't taste like that, but what comes out will taste exactly like regular wine. And the Mela, there's no change in taste from the wine that went into what came out, and therefore it doesn't help. It wouldn't change from being used for Avodah Zarah, so therefore it's just as no good. It's not considered Mevushal. Okay, so he's saying, just for starters, is that the wine was really Mevushal for a minute in the middle. He's agreeing that if you would pull out the grape juice in the middle, it would be considered Mevushal. He said, but since the final result is not Mevushal, that's not enough to make it mutter.
What happens in the middle of that?
Meaning the vapors escape,
yeah,
and then they collapse later on when they come back in. And sometimes says, I accepted that really it was Mevushal in the middle.
Affects the taste, and then
So it loses, let's say if it was wine, the alcohol would boil out. Or if it was grape juice, the grape essence would evaporate out. And then it come back in a few seconds later. So he says, but since the net result is that it tastes the same, so therefore, that doesn't make a difference. Now, another thing is, it's not clear at all. It's not that it's not clear. Many don't agree that, wait one second, that you have to have a change in taste b'chlal. This is what Shlomo Zalman says, and now, many people who speak about this, there's a whole bunch of Rishonim who mention in passing that when you make wine mevushal, it has a change in taste. So he's assuming that that's specifically, not that they're not just mentioning something in passing, they're mentioning something specific that it has to be a change in taste. Rav Osman says it's not true, we don't pass like that. Rav Adi also says we don't pass like that. That's not the din, you don't have to have a change in taste. Some people say that, and Shlomo Zalman himself is not 100% about that. Okay? But
is it possible to make it base mevushal?
That's what I said in passing. It's a question. It was Shlomo Zalman is accepting that it was mevushal in the middle of the process.
Right,
so had it become unmevushal by the turn, what's the difference? He says, I don't understand that. That's what but he said he
like something becomes edible, inedible, and we can't do that. So at one point you have to like firm gelatin or whatever it is. So it becomes inedible and edible again. So
right. Okay. I think he's saying it a little differently. He thinks that pasteurized juice overall would be used by with zara, so it doesn't bother people. I'm not sure exactly how he's dealing with the middle part. Okay, now, Shlomo Zalman says that after he first told people this psak, an American Rav came to him, someone involved in Hashkacha, I don't know who it was, came and said to him that it's not true that the pasteurized juice does taste different than regular juice. And nobody would use, the guy will not make mevushal wine because it tastes different. So Shlomo Zalman's whole thing is based on the assumption that it doesn't taste different. They would therefore presumably pour it from Zara. And he said, it's not true. It's not true. It does taste different. Nobody would use it. Okay? Rav Shechter once spoke about this, and he was saying over the shita, and when he sat down, an older man, Mr. Feischherzog, okay, one of the members of the family in the company, came over to him and told him the same thing. He didn't say this. He mentioned Shlomo Zalman says that there's no change in taste, and he says, it's not true. This is when people make wine, there is a taka taste.
Connoisseurs could tell the difference.
There's the Rabbi Frati tries to be machalik and say that for winemakers, for their professional pride, for the real fancy people, the connoisseurs, those people wouldn't be mevushal. But for regular guys who never know the difference, and maybe that's what's going on over here. You know what I mean? That because Shlomo Zalman says that if this American rabbi told him this, he then went and asked his experts, and his experts told him, it's no difference. Okay, there's no change in taste. Okay, so what's going on? I mean, either change in taste or not change in taste. So it's very likely, like what David's saying, is that really there's a change in taste. But for the average Joe would never know the difference between this one and that one. And wait a second. And therefore, if you hold that you need to have a change in taste, doesn't qualify. That's not qualify.
I'm just wondering on what basis this American rabbi had with people who are giving the wine out with Zara now.
No. He's not talking about that. He's talking about whether it changes the taste.
No, he's saying therefore.
No. Shlomo Zalman's the one who said if it doesn't change the taste, they won't give it with Zara.
Right.
So this person is saying it does change its taste.
And therefore
they wouldn't use it with Zara.
They wouldn't use it with Zara. Make it taste though.
No. It's the other way around. The Gemara says that the Gemara says that it's mevushal not for avodah zara. So we're working for that. Okay.
I mean, it's a very good smart to say that the connoisseur makes a difference because you want to put it for avodah zara. You want to give the best stuff.
See, for avodah zara is the best stuff. Okay.
In a little town, he wants to be living his own. We go check him in the connoisseur. It's not the way the Chazal made it clear. Chazal made it clear that it's not also mevushal because.
Okay.
Only take what's for sure.
Okay.
I'll go with the Yidel Joshua will do in his little town. What do we do in the main church?
I'll go to the Yidel. We hope that it was the Shagin, not the Yidel. But okay. So just one last part about this. Rav Adi says, I have a riot to you that you don't paskin that it has to be a change in taste. He says because I hold. He doesn't use these words, but Rosh Zalman also holds like this. Who he's talking about? Okay, he says, but I hold that in order to be mevushal, all it has to do is to get the yad flezboy for a second. You just have to get the yad flezboy and you're done. Misha Hirsiyach. That's what. And even some Rishonim use the word like even for a second. So Misha Hirsiyach, a drop. So Misha Hirsiyach. He says Misha Hirsiyach. There's no change in taste then. It got much to 100, whatever, 160, 170 degrees. Misha Hirsiyach for a second. There's going to be no change in taste. So you see that that's not. It's not, the change in taste is not what you're not mechuyev to do that. So it's sort of like Moshitasei. And it's Moshitasei for him that he holds like that, or a Moshe will hold like that, and Rosh Zalman himself holds like that. Rosh Zalman in the same shuv, it says that it only has to get to the Yad Slez. Okay. Number 3. The first time we spoke about Mevushal, I told you that the Rosh asks a question. He says, just because the wine is Mevushal and you wouldn't pour it in the Zohar, what does it have to do with making the wine not also if someone touches it? The Rosh is Kashrus. And the Rosh says is that it's not wine that's Mevushal is L'shriach, and I don't know if he uses exactly these words, and therefore it's not also because it's something that's L'shriach. So, Rabbi Yashin says, well, if it's true that nowadays it's become shriach to pasteurize wine, he says then the whole Rosh doesn't apply. The Rosh said it's only mutter because it's like shriach. He says, but if it becomes shriach, then it's going to be usher. Okay, it's not that head is going to fall away. Now, in the tshuva, he says many times. He says, I'm only saying this if it's really true that it's shriach. In other words, I'm sitting in Mevushal. I have no idea whether it's shriach or not shriach. He says, but if you tell me that it's true, that it's shriach, that everybody, that I don't know, he uses the word everybody, but he probably means most people. It's very common that you should be mavash, that you should make pasteurized wine. He says then, then the head is not going to apply.
So
okay.
The bishul doesn't go ahead and mavash and mamish also, or is it like in levels?
It's a good question. You're saying if the common way is through pasteurization. Is that I'm not sure. I don't remember if he said it that way. Only that way. Okay, I'm not sure. Now, this diak in what he writes, when he says it has to be everybody does it or most people do that, he's talking about Yidden or Goyim. Okay, what is he talking about? What do we care about? Who's the population of look and see if everybody does that? Okay, so I thought there was a diak that he means it has to be Yidden and Goyim. Okay, and the diak is as follows. Okay, before he talks about the Rosh part of it, he talks about a different part. I think that he rejects, and that is there's a sheet of Rabbi Tam that says it's not for a case that we're talking about right now. He says if a certain thing would be mutter, he says a certain thing can't be mutter. He says because if that would be mutter, then there'll be years that there will be no isser of stam yayin. Okay, and it can't be such a thing that there'll be a year that there's no isser of stam yayin. Okay, it's not for now. It has to do with a later thing. Okay, it's not. Yeah, it does. That's a sheet of Rabbi Tam. He says it can't be that this and this thing works because if that would be true, then there'll be certain years there'll be no isser of stam yayin. So that's not important. What his point. And Rosh says. He says. I'm sorry. Rabbi Yashin says. He says. So if he was worried about it for 1 year, that there won't be. Rabbi Tam. Was he that 1 year there won't be an Isser of Stam Yayin because all the wine will qualify as whatever Rabbi Tam is speaking about. He says Kolosh came for us that for everyone's Rabasha will never have the Isser of Stam Yayin. So for sure it should be mutter. Okay. Now he doesn't accept that in the end. He talks more about the Rosh. Okay, but what is he talking about when he says there'll be no Isser of Stam Yayin? Let me finish a second. He's not talking about Ken and grape juice. Right? He's talking about if there'll be no Isser of Stam Yayin, even the Goyim will have been Mevushal. So he's saying if everybody does this thing and the whole Isser won't apply, like in Rabbi Natam's case, it won't apply B'chlal. I mean, if I walk into the store and I Welch's grape juice, it will also always be mutter. He says there can't be such a thing and it won't be mutter. So it just tells you. Hold on a second. I'm just telling you what his idea of everybody does it means everybody, even Goyim, doing it. Okay? And therefore, I'm going to finish. I'll use 1 second though. And therefore, if that's what he means, then we have to really question it because he said, I'm only being machmir if it's really true that everyone's mavashal the wine. If we go out to the street, you can look in the store, the treif wine is not mavashal. Of course not. The treif wine is not mavashal at all. It's not generally mavashal. We wouldn't say that at all. Maybe a lot of kosher wine is mavashal, but treif wine, we wouldn't say that. Okay, yes, though.
It's going to be stam yayin even if it's mavashal. Because it became stam yayin before it became mavashal.
That's a good question. I'm not sure the answer to that question. It's a fair question. I don't know the answer, but that's not what he talks about.
Went all over the world.
Okay, it's a good question. I wasn't trying to talk about that. I'm just trying to pull out of that he was talking about Goyim also. When he said everyone has to talk about Goyim. But it's a good point. I don't answer your question. But so now. So
even if you say it's Yidden, but if they were just doing it to get out of the Isser, why should that count? If you do all you do doing it because that's the way they did it, then I hear you. Because just to get out there.
So that also tells us that it really has to do with what the world is doing. If the world is doing just for stam reasons, people just doing it for the issue, that wouldn't count. And we really have to care whether people just do it stam, which again says he's talking about Goyim. Okay, so which says to me that if he cares about the Goyim also, then it's not true. The Matthias is not true. Okay, but what the question is as follows. Let's say we're going to question. He says it. I don't know, half a dozen times. It's only if the Matthias is true that it's normal. That it became normal to pasteurize. Now that's for wine, I'm correct, but in grape juice, it's true grape juice, all grape juice out there in the street is all pasteurized. Okay, if you walk into the store, the Welch's grape juice is all pasteurized. So if it's true, maybe for wine, his Metzias won't be true. Therefore, his Chumrah won't be true. Mevushal will still work pasteurized will still work for wine. But maybe for grape juice, it'll be correct. Meaning for grape juice, it's true that if you walk into the store, the grape juice in the store is all pasteurized. So pasteurization has become normal. If pasteurization is normal, then the side of the Rosh is not going to apply anymore. Okay? So now, would he be mechalek like that? The wine is considered lo shchiach, and for grape juice it is shchiach. I'm not sure if you could be mechalek that. Well, they're both yain. In din, they're both wine. So if you say it has to be normal, it has to be not normal to be mevashal. So for some things it's normal, for some things it's not normal. So I'm not sure if you could split it like that, or say, yeah, wine is wine. They're two very distinct. It's not like red wine and white wine. They're very, even that. I mean, they're very distinct. Grape juice and wine are very distinct. Maybe, I'm not sure about what he would say about that. Okay? Now, even if the facts would be correct, well, let's say for grape juice, there's a possibility that the facts are correct, that it's normal. It's not clear that everyone postulates like the Rosh. I'm just going to say this briefly. And we remember we had a Kiveger who argued on the Rosh for a different angle. We spoke about that at a different time. But there's a strong question, and that is like this. When we spoke about the Rosh, I showed you Diukim to tell us that when the Rosh says it has to be, it's a Musal Shchicha, he didn't mean to say that it has to permanently be Musal Shchicha. He's explaining why when Chazal made their Isser, they made their Isser because at that point it was Musal Shchicha. But what would happen if tomorrow it becomes Shchicha? Then that doesn't change. Chazal, that was behind the reason was a Musal Shchicha. They didn't ask him a Mevushal. Okay? If you remember, I led you into saying that the Rosh didn't mean that it has to always be Musal Shchicha. The Rosh just meant that was what was behind Chazal's thinking when they said Mevushal is mutter. But once they said Mevushal is mutter, it stays mutter for good. Okay, now I showed you Diukim the Rosh like that. Okay, but the truth is that people who disagree with Rabbi Yashiv actually say it's not just Diukim that David made about this. Okay, Poskim speak about it in a bunch of cases, and particularly Bavnei speaks about it right about Yain Mevushal. Okay, Bavnei says like this: his father, he says, you know, Pop, my father, he didn't call him Pop. He says, you know, you asked me. He says to his father, he says, when you asked me, how could Chazal say the Yain Mevushal is mutter? That's what the Gemara says. They want to say a word about the word shricha. That's just the Rosh. They want to say a word about Rosh. How could Chazal say that Yain Mevushal is mutter? What's going to happen? Shem l'daris habayim minaschwa from Mevushal. He says maybe this is going to change. Okay, maybe the other day Rebbe Zara will be like David's, shtetl guy, and they'll start being used Yain Mevushal. How do we know? So his father gets him. Says, how could Chazal say that Mevushal is mutter? The Gemara doesn't even say it's because there's no shriach. How can they say that? Maybe things are going to change. To which Abdinez answers the back. He says, "Ein l'cha el mashkel chacham." And since at the time of the Gzeira, lo hayim nasim, what had b'chol Gzeira? Okay, that's what Abdinez says. He says it's not the Gzeira. The logic had to do with lo shriach. That's true, but the practice is it stays mutter even if it becomes shriach. Doesn't make a difference. Okay, so there are a number of other people. There are other places we talk about in general about Gzeiras Chazal, about lo shriach and this and that. Like machoiles and all kinds of other examples that they give, but that means they speaks exactly about this shaila. Now, so that sounds like Rabbi Yashiv. Okay, so you shouldn't think that nobody is him. Okay, because this. Before I get on to, I'll go back. Right? The tshuva that Rabbi Yashiv wrote about this was written in Tafshin Lamed Hey. Okay, but the tshuva did not become public until Tafshin Nun Beis. Okay. In Tafshin Nun Beis, the tshuva was printed in a journal from Belz, a journal called Nesivas HaKashrus. Okay, in the third volume of that. Okay, in Tafshin Nun Beis, in L of Tafshin Nun Beis, it was printed. That tshuva was first printed. Okay, and when the tshuva was now, I don't remember that, of course, but the tshuva caused a whole to-do, because here is Rabbi Yashiv saying that pasteurizing your wine is not going to make it mefushal. Okay, and in the next version of that journal, which is in Shvat of Tafshin and Gimel, okay, in the fourth volume of that journal, okay, so that was just a couple months later. There's a letter. There are letters. Okay, one letter is from a person named Rabbi Tzvi Dumb, who wrote Svarim, and he was Abdes in Hod HaSharon. I don't know who. I never heard him before, but okay, some person who wrote in a letter. Okay, and the letters are dated in Tishrei. Okay? Tishrei. So that means the journal was printed in El of Tafshin days, and in Tishrei he wrote to Rabbi Yashiv, and in Tishrei Rabbi Yashiv wrote back to him, and those tshuvas are printed in here. Okay? Now, if you open up the sefer called Kavitz Tshuvas, okay, Rabbi Yashiv's Tshuvas, these two tshuvas, Rabbi Yashiv's first tshuva and his response to Rabbi Dam, are printed right next to each other. It's Ayin Hey and Ayin Vav. Okay? Ayin Hey is the tshuva I told you until now. Okay? It's a long tshuva. Okay? Not so typical like most of the tshuva. It's very long and explains all the things I told you and more he talks about in the tshuva. And then the next one, Ayin Vav, it's really short. It's the response to this person to Rabbi Dam. Okay? But in the sefer, it doesn't tell you, doesn't bring this Shiloh that Rabbi Dam has, this Rabbi Dam has, who wrote a whole long article, a whole long letter to Rabbi Yashiv saying all the reasons why he questioned what he said. Okay? So one of the things that this person asked to Rabbi Yashiv was, but the Avnei Nezer says not like that. The Avnei Nezer says it doesn't make a difference if it becomes shliach later on. Even if it was shliach later on, it makes no difference. Okay? That's one of the questions he asked him. So Rabbi Yashiv said, well, this wine is not the same Mevushal wine that Chazal had. So this wine is not the same stuff that Chazal had, because when Chazal's time, when they cooked up wine in a pot, it would taste differently. But nowadays, when we do it in pasteurized, it doesn't taste any differently. As it doesn't taste any differently, it's not the same wine that Chazal we're talking about. So now, I'm going to tell you in a second. If you saw that tshuva just in the printed sefer, in the Kavitz Tshuvas, okay, someone with Mekabetz his Tshuvas, okay, it's Kavitz Tshuvas. If you saw that sefer there, you would say the first tshuva says one reason why pasteurized is not good, and the second tshuva is giving another reason, and another reason he's giving is like our reason number 2, the blue one, or at least in my mind it's blue. The blue one that has to, you have to have a change in taste. Okay, if you open up the sefer, that's what you'll think. Okay, but if you open up the journal, it makes no sense. Like David said, it makes no sense. The person said to him, "Wait a second, the Avnei Nezer says it makes no difference if it's normal or not normal anymore." And the Rabbi Yashiv says, "Okay, I'll think of a new reason to make it answer." Okay, well that's silly. That's not what he's doing, right? If you read it and what's going on, it's a response to the person's letter. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, if you look in the truth, it says, "L'chloy this Rabbi Dam." Okay, I'm not just making it up. Okay, but he's responding to the person. How is he responding? By telling him what we said beforehand, that there has to be a change in taste. That's like as if another reason. Like, what do you think? Just a new reason? So it seems to me that what he's saying is like this. Okay, it's not so clear. What I'm about to tell you is more clear than other people. Okay, in Rosh Zalman says something like this. Rabbi Vagis says something like this also. Such an idea of what I'm about to say to you. I'll put up the words to you in a second. So maybe you'll hear it if I tell it to you. I'll show you what Rabbi Yashiv really said. What did Rabbi Yashiv say in reason number 3, in orange? What did he say? He said is that if it becomes normal to be Mevushal wine, if it becomes normal to be Mevushal wine, then the heter of Mevushal shliach doesn't apply anymore. Okay? So the Kashrus on that was, Avnei Nezer says it's not true. Avnei Nezer says once Chazal chose to make it mutter, it stays mutter even if it becomes shliach. And to that Rabbi Yashiv is saying is it's true. The wine that Chazal were matir stays mutter even if it becomes shliach. But this is not the wine that Chazal were matir. The wine that Chazal was matir was wine that got cooked to the point that it had a new taste to it. This is not that wine. So it's true that once Chazal were matir it stays mutter. I didn't mean to say is that once Chazal were matir it stays mutter, and if it becomes normal to us. He says no. That wine taka would say us it, but we have a new kind of wine, a different way of being Mevushal wine that doesn't change the taste. That's not the one they talk about. So the svar doesn't apply because it is shliach. The svar doesn't apply, and to say it's the same to Chazal matir. No, this is not the Mevushal that Chazal matir. They were matir a different Mevushal. So we want to say whatever Chazal matir, we have to keep what they were matir. This is not that thing. It's a different. Okay? Right? If it would be Rosh, we would say the same svar applies. Just like that was Rosh. This is also Rosh, and it's mutter also. It's also not usher. We would say it's the same.
Rosh has nothing to do with nothing.
No, the Rosh says.
It's a new thing.
No. It's not. No, it's not that we would just say. Chazal said to be Mevushal's wine is mutter because it's Rosh Shliach. If I find a variation, almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing, and it will also be Rosh Shliach. I would also say it's mutter. So, but if it is Shliach, then I don't have that push to say that it's mutter. It's not the same thing, and it's not the Rosh Shliach, so I don't have a reason to say it. Word to be. Now I'll show you the words that Rabbi Yashiv says. You can tell me whether he means or he doesn't mean it. It's not clear. It's not 100%. I'll show you that in the inside. I put it on the screen a minute ago. It was an orange light. That's almost the whole thing, yeah. You can look at yourself. I don't care. You can look at it. Okay, so Rashi says like this. This is the second Jew. Yain is special. Who ba'ofen shadbishul mashana tamu shmai. Okay, that's what Yain Mevushal is.
What does it mean of shmai?
That's it. Don't worry about it. Aval. That's why I skipped those ones. Aval bishul kazeh shleim. He says that's called stam yain. Okay. Aval bishul kazeh shleim mashana tamu ushmai. Harim b'chaf kazeh chazal. This wine, pasteurized wine, is nothing different about it. Okay. Now, then he says, "Ubechei kim banu lesser mash chazal hitiru." He says, we're not talking about the same wine. This is not the wine that they will matter. In other words, if it was the same wine, I would be accept from you that we should say that if it's the same wine, then we're not going to be matter. But that we don't think when things change. In other words, the Avnei Yisrael said, whatever was mutter, it stays mutter even if the mitzias, the logic kind of changes. That's very nice that the Avnei Yisrael says that. He says, but this is not the one that they were talking about. Okay? So that to me is connected to what he said to Rosh. He's not saying a new reason. Okay, again, if you open up the Sefer, then you sort of like gloss over the end part of it. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know what he's talking about that. That's not so important. What he means to say is, it has to have the same taste. But it's hard to believe that that's what he's saying when the first two was all about the Rosh, and now this two is picking up like as if there's a new reason. Oh, there's another reason to answer it. So again, if you didn't see the letter that brought about this tshuva, you might think like that. Once you see that the question that the person asked and what he's trying to answer, then I think that this way is right. Now, what's going to come out, but if I'm right, not only is there an understanding of it, it's going to come out that even Rabbi Yashiv's second tshuva, who's saying it's also because it has to have a change in taste, is dependent on the first thing, which has to be lo shchiach. Which so it turns out, the question that I said to you before is it really true that it's lo shchiach? Rabbi Yashiv says a dozen times, okay, half a dozen times. He says, I'm only saying my tshuva is really lo shchiach. Well, then those same questions apply even according to the later reason. Okay, it's not another reason; it's a extra layer in understanding the first reason. Okay, so anyhow, so we've seen these four reasons in the different ways that I'm going to just summarize you for now, not summarize, just conclude. As I said to you, the American national hashgachas tend to be maple and say that pasteurization is just perfect for making wine to be mevushal. Also, wine or grape just be mevushal. In Eretz Yisrael, some of the hashgachas don't accept it. They follow some of these different sheets that I mentioned to you that pasteurization is not, and some of them do a compromise, which is they won't consider it mevushal, but they'll write on the bottle it was mevushal idei pistor. It was what? Right, it was under pasteurization. So sort of like do it if you read Hebrew and you know what I'm talking about, then you just ask your rabbi. If you don't read Hebrew, it's okay. You can shake it. You can eat anything.
What happens if the pasteurization is the agency allowed going to get involved?
They do.
No.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're probably right. They probably won't let. But what you do in your house, then you have to decide whether you want someone to touch it. You're right. You probably they wouldn't let.
Touch is not a problem. Okay,
so it can be negated to a child. Okay, but so that's a compromise that you see in Eretz Yisrael kind of compromise that the bottom of some of them will say that we did it this way. So